ear-piercing screams, a mother's hands breaking her little girl's toes one by one, all for a pair of tiny, perfect feet. Greetings, seekers of the strange. Welcome to Beyond Bizarre. I'm your host, taking you past normal, beyond weird, into the absolutely mind-blowing. Today we step into one of history's most painful mysteries, the tradition of Chinese foot binding. For centuries in China, tiny, deformed feet were the ultimate status symbol, and young girls endured unspeakable agony to attain this cruel ideal. We'll uncover when and why foot binding began, how it was done, what it symbolized, and how this brutal practice was finally brought to an end. For about 1,000 years, from the 10th century up to the mid-20th, Chinese society prized the bound foot as the height of feminine beauty and status. But behind the elegance of those delicate silk shoes lay a horrific reality. Creating the famed 3-inch lotus feet meant breaking and binding a child's feet into a grotesque new shape. By the 1800s, nearly half of all Chinese women, and virtually all upper-class women, had their feet bound. Simply walking became agony, yet this was the accepted price of beauty and marriage. Why would parents cripple their own daughters? How did such cruelty become a celebrated norm? Legends trace foot binding back over a millennium. The practice likely originated among court dancers during the 10th century. One story claims it began when Emperor Li Yu watched his favorite concubine, Yao Niang, perform a mesmerizing dance on tiptoe with her feet bound in white silk. Her dance was so enchanting that other court ladies imitated her. What started as a whimsical fad in the royal palace soon spread among the elite. Tiny feet, ideally just 3 inches long, the coveted golden lotus, became the ultimate mark of beauty and refinement. Foot binding turned into a rite of passage, a test of endurance that proved a girl's obedience and prepared her for womanhood. A daughter with bound feet was seen as more marriageable. Her tiny, mincing steps were thought to be the height of graceful femininity. As centuries passed, the pressure to bind feet grew immense. By the Qing dynasty, even families in remote villages felt compelled to bind their daughters to improve their marriage prospects. The entire culture was enthralled by the allure of small feet. Yet, behind this ideal of elegance lurked unspeakable pain, a nightmare that each tiny foot had to endure. The reality of foot binding was far more gruesome than the poetry and pretty shoes suggested. The process had to start early, while a girl was still a toddler, usually between ages 4 and 6. First, her feet would be soaked in warm water mixed with herbal brews, a preparation meant to soften the skin and flesh. Then her toenails were cut back as far as possible to prevent them from growing into the skin later. And then the true agony began. One by one, the girl's 4 small toes were curled under her foot and pressed down until they snapped, the bones literally broken on purpose. The arch of her foot was forcefully bent and fractured next, so that her foot could be folded in on itself, toes toward heel. The child would be howling in pain as her delicate bones gave way, but the process was not over. Using long cotton bandages, the binder would wrap the foot tightly in a figure-8 motion. With each pass, the bandage pulled the broken toes further underneath and squeezed the heel and ball of the foot closer together, contorting the foot into an unnatural cone shape. The binding was yanked so tight that the girl could no longer move her toes at all. To ensure the foot would truly deform, families often forced the girl to stand and even walk on her freshly broken feet, so that her full weight would crush the arch and toes completely. The first year was reportedly the most excruciating. The girl's feet would swell, bleed, and throb day and night until the bones broke fully and began to harden into their new, twisted shape. Those who survived carried the effects for the rest of their days. A woman with bound feet could barely walk normally. She moved in short, shuffling steps, balancing on her heels since her contorted toes could not support weight. Falling and injury were constant worries. Even in old age, women with lotus feet were far more likely to break their hips or other bones in a fall because their balance was so poor. Simply standing up from a chair could be a struggle without assistance. And yet, for generations, these women endured all of this because society told them it was worth it. Bound feet were seen as the key to a good marriage, the pride of a family. Many men found the tiny feet intensely erotic, but paradoxically, they often did not want to see them bare. The bound feet were usually kept hidden inside silk slippers at all times. Society wrapped the brutal truth of foot binding in layers of culture and love. Mothers bound their daughters' feet out of a sense of duty and affection. In their eyes, crippling their daughters was a cruel kindness. It was the only way to ensure the girls would be acceptable brides. For almost 1,000 years, this painful tradition survived on the promise that suffering in youth would secure security and honor in adulthood. It wasn't until 1912, after the Qing dynasty fell, that the new Republican government again outlawed foot binding nationwide. This time, the ban slowly started to take effect, especially in cities. But in many rural areas, old habits died hard. In secret, some families continued binding their little girls' feet behind closed doors. Only with the rise of communist China in 1949 did foot binding truly meet its end. The communist government was determined to modernize and saw foot binding as a feudal evil to be eradicated. After roughly 1,000 years, the nightmare of foot binding finally came to an end. Its legacy, however, remains stamped in history and living memory. By the 2000s, only a handful of women who had their feet bound as girls were still alive. Today, foot binding is a relic of the past. In fact, the last factory that made lotus shoes didn't close until 1999, a stark reminder of how recent this history really is. Foot binding now serves as one of the most haunting examples of how cultural pressures can normalize extreme human suffering. For nearly 1,000 years, Chinese girls were subjected to this painful tradition, all for the sake of an imposed ideal of beauty and status. Today, foot binding is gone, banned and discredited, but its story remains as a cautionary tale. It's a reminder of how cultural norms can deform the body and the soul, and how incredibly resilient people can be in the face of suffering. And that's another journey, beyond bizarre. If your mind is officially blown, smash that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Until next time, keep pushing beyond the ordinary.